Now what will it be? Death or exile?
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the TV Exiles, and this week we'll be looking at episode 9 of the final season of Star Wars The Clone Wars, this one titled Old Friends Not Forgotten. And one friend that isn't to be forgotten is my fellow film exile, my fellow Star Wars enthusiast, Brandon.
Hey, glad to be remembered.
Right, let's get into it. So, right from the opening frame, it's pretty clear that this arc will be different. It opens up with the Lucasfilm Limited in green on a black background. What did you feel when you saw that beginning? It kind of reminded me of the original trilogy.
Yeah, that's right when it opened up and I saw that logo, I was like, oh, they're going for something different this time, because generally you open with the quote and the logo kind of flashing on screen, but this one was like, okay, they're kind of going for more of a film on this and trying to be more like classic Star Wars, and it was a good indication that something is different just from the first screen. I thought it was a good way to kind of just signal me and catch my attention right away.
Definitely, it was pretty cool to see, and it did really indicate to me that this is your old Star Wars, and it did feel like that, to be honest with you, the episode as a whole.
Yeah, it felt like this one was more of that tribute to Lucas, because this one is going to be tied directly to the last film that George Lucas did. So I thought it was a very clever way to open it. So bravo.
Definitely. And how did you feel about the opening battle with Obi-Wan, Anakin, and the clones?
Like, many movies in the Star Wars franchise, it opened up with a nice big battle, and the action was very, very well done on it. That shot of Obi-Wan from the trailer deflecting the missile and then kind of emerging from the smoke is, that's better than a lot of other Star Wars shots that get hailed. That was a very, very cinematic shot.
Yeah, and the whole bit of Anakin just standing there while the others are hiding, and he's just using the Force to dodge these laser blasts. It kind of shows his power and how advanced he has become in terms of Force sensitivity.
Yeah, it was a touch silly, but at the same time, it was the right kind of silly, where it felt like old school Star Wars silly, where he was just a touch cocky, but that he pulls it off like they always know that he does. So again, not over the top silly, but just enough to where it had that good smirk to it.
Definitely, and all Star Wars going back to from the original trilogy through to the prequels all had that little bit of a wink and a nod. So I thought they did it really well.
I did really love when the clones behind Obi-Wan were waiting for permission to join in and to destroy some of the droids. I thought that was kind of funny, like the dog waiting to be able to go get its treat. They knew they had to wait, but go ahead. I thought that was fun.
Yeah, for sure. So it's the first time since 2013 that we've seen Ahsoka and Anakin on screen together, reunited. How do you feel that the creative team did? Did they get it right? Did they set the mood correct? Anything that you disliked?
I actually thought the scene played out really well from all angles. Seeing Anakin's excitement to see her, it showed a little bit of his immaturity. He kind of wanted to catch up. He wanted to know what was going on, and it showed where she's come from and become more mature since she last left him, where she's straight business. Like, we don't have time to catch up. We've got to get on this right now. And he's kind of taken back by that, because they used to have that playful banter together. So he notices right away that there's something different. They're still friends, but there's definitely a difference between the last time they saw each other.
Yeah,
and I thought it was handled really well.
I'm not sure if maturity is quite the word that I'd use. The way I think of it is that Anakin Skywalker is governed by his feelings, and he doesn't do very well in concealing or limiting his feelings like a Jedi is supposed to. He's pretty much governed by them. And when he sees his sister, essentially, for the first time in a long while, after he thought he'd lost her, he can't contain that joy. And so I would say that it was such a perfect depiction of his character, and also seeing Ahsoka be clear with the objective of the mission and saying, yeah, I'm happy to see you, but this has priority here.
Yeah, she's more in control of her emotions than he is.
She is in more control of her emotions, and she is really more of a Jedi than he is, even though she's left the Jedi Order and he's remained in it. I think that's a really interesting meeting, and then going from there, very emotional in terms of how she's integrated into the group. Everyone's calling her commander. They painted the helmets of the group to honor her. I think it was really, really powerful scene, and my favorite single sequence, let's say, from the whole of season 7 so far.
Yeah, that's probably pretty fair. Yeah, it was her return to not only Anakin and Obi-Wan, but to the clones, who we've spoken about many times, how it's the relationship between the Jedi and the clones that have been a big driving force on this series as a whole. So seeing their respect for her when she comes back was very well handled.
Yeah, and she has a bit of a tough word with Obi-Wan, doesn't she?
She does. It's I thought it was good because Obi-Wan is always loyal to the Jedi. She understands now that she's not a Jedi, and she's kind of perturbed that they just don't trust her immediately and say we need to go. And it's kind of an interesting moment when Bo-Katan calls Obi-Wan out on his relationship with Satine.
Yeah, and I think that's the first time that Anakin realizes that Obi-Wan was romantically involved with anyone as well, right? I don't think it's been explicitly said or shown in the past in front of Anakin, right? So that's kind of a justification for him in terms of his relationship with Padme.
Definitely, and at the same time, not knowing that even his master, harbored feelings, and how he treated those feelings led him to hide Padme for so long, when it could have been something he talked to his master about, and we're kind of just at the point now where it's too late to really address that situation, even though we know Obi-Wan knows based on the beginning of this season.
Correct.
It does show that the Jedi aren't perfect. The Jedi do have these feelings, that Anakin has just never been the one to be able to control them. And he thought everybody else could, and that he was alone in that. And that's kind of what has always led him into that hiding and holding in of his emotions for these outbursts.
Definitely. So in this interaction as well, we see Anakin present Ahsoka with a gift. It's her lightsabers, which he didn't have. He says he might have improved them a little bit. So he changed the color of the laser from green to blue. So assuming that he's got some new kyber crystals in there. What do you think about that change and what that could mean?
As far as what it means, I don't know if they just kind of did it from a visual standpoint to maybe blue they just thought looked better for the look they were going for this season. It's not one of those things that bugged me, but just the little comment of, maybe made him a little bit better because his color is always blue. So it brings up that little competition in them again. But it's kind of his last gift to her is a little bit of him. So again, I don't think the color change is a bad thing. It is addressed, and it's not in a way that just has to spell it out for you. It's just kind of insinuated that that's what happened. And if you know how the crystals and the lightsabers work, then it all just kind of makes sense.
And this is the last time Ahsoka and Anakin will meet until many years later as adversaries on Rebels. So how do you feel about this moment? Did they treat it with the reverence and respect that it deserved? What did you feel about how the score hit at that moment? What were your feelings watching the scene?
It's actually one of those things that just shows the brilliance of the writing and the attention that's shown in this. Is the way that this scene plays out is we know as an audience that this is their last confrontation, but the characters don't. They assume that they're going to see each other again, so they still just talk like they're friends, and that they'll see each other in a few days and they'll be able to catch up. It's not given a heavy-handedness like this is the end, because they don't know that. The story doesn't say that this is the end, but we know, and I actually think that makes the scene almost a little bit more sad, because neither of them get to say goodbye. Again, I think it's very well handled, and it shows a lot of respect that the writers have to episode 3. Is they're not trying to walk over it; they're trying to walk around and through it, in a way that plays just like it's episode 2.5.
Yeah, I think there's another little nod of respect to episode 3 as well, where the crew paint their helmets orange. Ahsoka takes half the crew to the Siege of Mandalore, but Obi-Wan and Anakin take the other half of the crew onto their path going forward, i.e. going to Coruscant, and then obviously whatever events happen from there going forward. Now, in episode 3, although it's not a direct comparison to the helmets that they painted in this episode, there is a crew with Obi-Wan on Utapau, and those clones have splashes of orange. So that might be by chance. I might be completely barking up the wrong tree, but I think there might have been a wink and a nod there.
It's possible, they looked back when they were watching episode 3 looking to tie it in, that they saw that orange and took that as part of the inspiration to add the Ahsoka's look onto the helmets in this episode. So it's quite possible they were tied. It might just be, again, a tip of the hat, which either way is still pretty nice.
Okay, so let's move on to the Siege of Mandalore, and it finally begins with a huge action sequence with Ahsoka jumping out of air carriers without jetpacks, not needing them, jumping from carrier to carrier, slicing and dicing. Ridiculously incredible action, in my opinion. What did you think? And did it meet your expectations?
I mean, absolutely. It's kind of what we've come to expect from the Bad Batch arc at the beginning, where it was just a very long take going from ship to ship. There was, either a small nod to or just a coincidence that kind of reminded me of the Winter Soldier, where he jumps out of the jet with no parachute, and in this one he's like, she's like, I don't need a jetpack, you know that, and it's just kind of a fun moment, and then on her way out, you see her in full control of her power and her skill, all the way down to the ground, and it's really seeing her back in her comfort zone, like we haven't seen in 7 or 8 years now.
Well, speaking of 7 or 8 years, there was someone else that we haven't seen in 7 or 8 years as well.
Darth Maul finally again. Obviously we saw him a few episodes ago, just in that hologram. But seeing him again, he's come from being a cool character in episode 1 that should have survived, to a full-fledged, incredible character, and very menacing villain. And I mean, as much as you kind of wondered how it would work out at first, Sam Witwer for the voice of him is borderline iconic as his look at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
He's so in control, yet looks so menacing and out of control. It's kind of that perfect balance. So it's great to see him again, even though it was a very small role in this episode.
Yeah, I think we'll see more going forward. And
Oh,
yeah, definitely, he has been developed so well in this series, in the Clone Wars, which is a tribute to the show that, for me, they have created some of the greatest Star Wars characters ever. And Darth Maul is so well written. He's written with complexity. He's got his own opinions, his own motivations, and I think he was fantastically written, and I'm so glad to see him back. And we haven't seen him since season 5, and that's the same time we kind of lost Ahsoka, right?
Yeah, he lost his duel with Sidious, or Palpatine, and his brother Savage Opress died.
Yeah.
And that was the last we saw of him. He was intended to be in further seasons, but they ended up turning it into a series of comics called The Son of Dathomir. So you can read how he escaped from the clutches of Palpatine and where he's been. But other than that, yeah, same thing with Ahsoka. We went so many years and we saw her as an adult, but we never knew where she ended up. And, it's great to have both of those, the two most iconic characters from the series back on screen again.
Yeah, and we've mentioned how this episode touches on other installments in Star Wars canon, how the opening is kind of like the original trilogy, how it touches on episode 2, the Clone Wars, it touches on episode 3, it also touches on Star Wars Rebels.
So yeah, there's a few really nice Easter eggs. The one that at the very, very beginning opening, when they're setting up the events of this episode, you see a bunch of Jedi with in the holograms, and one of them is the Padawan of Caleb Doom, which ends up being Kanan Jarrus, which is the Jedi in Star Wars Rebels. So we actually see him there with his master. It's just kind of a blink and you miss it cameo, and you wouldn't even know it was him if you don't remember his story from Rebels being told.
Yeah, but it's nice seeing him there as a child and kind of getting an understanding of how far along he was in his development from an age perspective as a Jedi. Yeah, I think that's really cool. And honestly, when this season ends, I want to go straight into Star Wars Rebels and rewatch that.
First one will be episode 3 for me, and then probably go back into Rebels and start picking up, because I want to see this finish its play out in a movie from 17 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Another nice little detail was at the beginning when Obi-Wan is talking to Ahsoka about fighting Maul, and he says, "You better capture him this time. I've killed him before, and he doesn't tend to stay dead." And that's obviously a reference to episode 1, but also, so was it season 3 or season 4 of
That's right.
of Clone Wars, when he thinks that he froze to death out in space, but the Mandalorians found him and put him on the path he's on now. So
yeah, that's for sure. Right, so let's give our closing remarks, our overall thoughts on the beginning of this final arc of the Clone Wars. And are you excited for what's to come?
absolutely. This is just one episode in, and that this already feels like was the entire intention of the season, and it seems like this is where they put a lot of passion. I can't wait for next week's episode, but I really can't wait to see it all as one as I rewatch it going forward.
Completely agree. Absolutely loved this first episode of the final arc and cannot wait for more. And until then, where can people find you, Brandon?
I am on Twitter at @the_meatball_84.
Cool. And you can find me on Twitter as well at Vinaldo7. And until next time, stay exiled.